I'm going to start at the top with actually just a quote. Angela Merkel, the German chief, said the following: "I see no way to reverse this. We all need to look at the reality of the situation. It is not the hour for wishful thinking." Do you agree with her? Do you think there's a lot of talk about reversal? Aaron, do you think?
Well, she's negotiating, right? She's the EU is basically saying we're not going to give Britain any favors in order to keep them in or let them go out easily. So that's her negotiating ploy. But the reality is this vote, as crazy as it was, is not legally binding. Right. So the British Parliament or the next Prime Minister, David Cameron, said he won't do this. They could basically veto it. There is a referendum in the UK. I think about 4 million people have signed it so far, saying we want another vote. And maybe we'll see how that vote goes. But as of right now, all the major politicians in the UK, including Cameron, are saying we're going to respect the will of the people. Elections have consequences, and they voted for Brexit, and that's where we stand.
Chris, do you actually think that this will lawmakers decide to disregard the will of the people? I mean, look, George Soros was speaking just the other day in Europe, and he said it's not a fait accompli. He's convinced that it's not a done deal. Should they?
I think lawmakers are going to do what they see in their own political interest, and so which is what lawmakers do. There's a leadership shuffle going on right now in the Conservative Party. After that shakes out, they're all sort of saying the right things. They're saying Brexit was done, it's over with. I'm going to follow the will of the people, but we'll wait to see what happens with this leadership shuffle, and that'll really decide things.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really been bugging me is, okay, so the Leave side got its wish, and there's no plan. there's very little plan. All of the leaders who are leading that Leave charge, they don't have much to say, and in fact, they've been
right. So, and then that's the problem. You know, when 52% of the country voted for Leave, they were voting for different things, and so now the Conservative Party is going to have to actually come up with a plan. You know, a lot of people are saying, well, we want the Norway model, which is basically you follow the EU rules of free movement of people, free movement of capital, and paying into the general fund without any say. So that's a distinction without a difference, other than the fact that Britain has less say over the actual policies.
And I'm sorry, let's not forget, so Boris Johnson, the guy who led the Leave campaign this morning or overnight, said he doesn't want to be the boss, right? So it's total chaos in the UK right now. I mean, there's no, who is running the British government? So I agree with Chris, politicians are going to do what's in their best interest politically, but right now it's really hard to figure out what that is.
Yeah, and what I also don't understand is this, I mean, you mentioned the Norway model. A lot of that, the terms of that, you know, the free movement of people and capital, that's exactly what the British people were voting against, right? The idea that they didn't want immigration, that they didn't want, you know, how could they possibly strike a middle ground there?
Well, I think that, you know, what the politicians who want that will say is like, look, we left the EU. And voters who are voting for this, it's not entirely clear that they were super well informed as to the details of all of this. And so I'm sure they could make this deal, go to the people and say one thing to one side, another thing to another, and just sort of, you know, pretend nobody noticed.
And that's basically what Angela Merkel is saying in that quote. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You can't have it both ways. You can't have the free trade without the migration of labor, because that's what the EU is all about. And that is the big issue, one of the big issues that the British Parliament, politicians, and the voters are going to have to resolve for themselves. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yes, no, do you think they're actually going to do a revote, Aaron?
No revote.
I don't think there'll be another referendum now.
All right.